I became aware of Hollywood Roses when Axl called me when I was a booking agent at a place called Silver Lining Entertainment. He said that he was referred to me and he wanted me to get them some gigs, and I was like, cool, send me a demo tape, I'll check it out. And he's like, well, actually, I'd like to bring you a demo tape and play it now. And I was like, well, that would be great, except for I don't have stereo here. And he's like, well, that's okay, no problem. I'll come and bring a ghetto blaster and play it for you. And I laughed, I was like, well, if a guy's that's persistent, I'm going to let him come. And he and Izzy showed up with a ghetto blaster in hand and had the demo tape and a few snapshots of the band. And I was blown away by the demo. I booked them sight unseen.
Throughout the early months of 1984, Hollywood Rose continued to play with increasing success. However, after a show at the Music Machine, the band's lineup began to change.
We played a show in mid-'84 at a place called the Music Machine it's not in Hollywood, but it's close to Hollywood. It's in Santa Monica. The show was all right. It sort of went off without a hitch. The more I think of it, the more I recall what ended up happening is at somewhere during the show, I think I hit him in the head with my guitar, the top of my guitar, and he got really embarrassed and upset. And we got through the show, and then afterward he was just fuming, and he went on this little, sulking. I don't know what I'm thinking of. He got an attitude, and he stormed off. And sort of that was the end. I mean, it wasn't set up in any way. We weren't planning on ending. It was just him walking off.
I came to manage Guns N' Roses just at the tail end of Hollywood Roses. I booked Hollywood Roses to open for a band called Black Sheep at the Music Machine, and that was the band that Slash was currently in. So that night, I introduced Slash to Axl, and who knew that was history in the making. Chris Webber had quit the band, and Slash wasn't very happy in Black Sheep. I suggested to him that he try out.
After that show at the Music Machine, Slash, who was a friend of mine as well. I mean, I knew him from high school as well. Both him, Tracy, and all of us went to Fairfax High. He took over the guitar playing after I left. And I have to rack my brain a little bit, but he did that for a while until the end of the year. And I think I was hanging out because we were still all friends, although I had sort of mixed feelings about not playing guitar in it. But closer to the end of the year, they had booked a show for New Year's and New Year's Eve or something, and I don't think Slash could do it. For some reason, he couldn't do it. He knew ahead of time he couldn't do it, or he didn't want to do it, or something. So I had been talking, because we were friends, I'd been talking to Izzy, and he said, well, why don't we just get together again, and we'll all do it.
The 1984 New Year's Eve reunion show was to prove to be Hollywood Rose's swan song. Axl soon began to play with another local band, LA Guns. Together with the band's guitarist Tracy, the pair formed a spin-off group along with Izzy, Rob Gardner, and newly recruited Duff McKagan.
The way Guns N' Roses came together is the way a lot of bands come together. The dynamics in the present group wasn't working. They knew it didn't have magic. And musicians are always looking for that magic to happen. And so they started putting out ads and reading ads in magazines and publications, two of them being one The Recycler, the other Music Connection magazine. And they did start putting members together that way. I believe that's the way they found Duff, in fact, because he was with his own band.
The name of the band was a mixture of the two bands, LA Guns and Hollywood Rose. And because Axl had played in LA Guns for a short period of time, at some point put the two names together, LA Guns and Hollywood Rose, and then they formed them together, and then they started gigging under that name, Guns N' Roses.
On March the 26th, 1985, a flyer for a show at the Troubadour appeared, bearing the name Guns N' Roses. However, almost as soon as the band had formed, their lineup began to change. Both Tracy Guns and Rob Gardner left, making way for Slash to return to the lead spot, bringing with him Steven Adler on drums, completing the lineup that would go on to become one of the biggest bands in the world. Almost immediately, the newly formed unit embarked upon what would become known as the Hell Tour.
When the band first got together, Duff, who had been in a prior band and he came from Seattle, his earlier band had a few gigs up north in Seattle. And these were paying gigs. I mean, they were supposed to get about a couple $100, $250 a gig. And so he figured since his old band no longer existed, his new band, they could all hit the road, go up to Seattle and make a few bucks and play. You know, sounds cool. Well, on their way there, they all go. On their way there, of course, they have this old, I don't know if it was a car or a van, but it was old, it was rotten, it was breaking down, and indeed it broke down before they ever got to where they were supposed to be. They managed to get into town, either hitchhiking or grabbing rides. I think they even abandoned the vehicle and started doing these shows. What they discovered are two things that every artist knows nowadays. You're not going to have any people in the house if you don't promote it. Well, none of the venues promoted the shows. They didn't even know Guns N' Roses was coming. They thought it was the other band. And so when Guns N' Roses started playing, they were lucky if there were 10 people watching them. And of course, that just made the venue owners and managers very angry. And I think they might have made $50, maybe $100 off that whole tour because many of them refused to pay them at all. And they managed to scrape enough to get back to L.A. And Slash used to say, Slash said, you know, that tour almost killed us. But what it did is it made them more of a unit because they suffered through it. And that tour was real grief for them. It really was.
Returning to LA, the band moved in with Vicky Hamilton, who was now their manager.
When I lived with Guns N' Roses, we lived on Clark Street, which is kind of catty corner to the Whiskey A Go-Go. You know, it was like me and Jennifer Perry shared the bedroom, and all the guys lived in the living room, and it was just always a mess. There was like beer cans and, you know, they lived on McDonald's and French fries all over the floor and sleeping bags and amps and just hideous, really.
And even when they lived with Vicky, one of the first articles that was ever written about Guns N' Roses, and in fact the first cover they ever had was in Music Connection. And in that article, the writer describes the place, and it's Vicky's apartment. It's not their place, it's Vicky's apartment, and how trashed it was. I mean, you know, these are young rock and roll guys, and the last thing they're thinking about is picking up after themselves, and so hygiene left a lot to be desired.
During the remainder of 1985, Axl and Guns N' Roses became regulars on the LA club scene. As their audience began to grow, so too did the interest from record companies.
Guns N' Roses became popular the old-fashioned way. They didn't manufacture anything. It was all word of mouth. People couldn't stop talking about them. If someone had seen the show, they'd tell a friend. They'd bring another friend to the next show. That friend brought another friend. And it almost seemed like overnight, although I'm sure it took a little while, but, you know, during those days it seemed, God, this is happening fast. Because in the first shows when you saw them, you know, you were lucky to have 20, 30, 40 people there. But within a very short period of time, this band started bringing hundreds of people until there were lines of hundreds of people outside who couldn't get in the venue.